Hello, everyone. Welcome. We are in the breakout session called Regulating Anxiety and Depression. If you're registered for the breakout for parenting adolescents and you're in the wrong place, absolutely no shame. We will not be offended if you stand up and go over there. So just no judgment.
Yes, absolutely. Right across the hall if
Right
you want to
across
hear
the
the
hall if you want to head
parenting
over there.
adolescents.
But
Yes.
I'm pretty sure we're going to have a really good time here too. So
For sure, definitely. As good of a time as you can have in a room talking about anxiety and depression.
that
will
is
have
fair.
for sure.
That is fair.
My name is Ryan. I'm one of the pastors here. This is my wife, Jenna. We're really glad that you guys are here tonight. It's funny, Kevin mentioned there's a lot of things that we could be doing on a Friday night, right? But we are here. Yes, there could be. But we picked something really good to do, a worthy use of our time. And so we just wanted to thank you for being here, especially if you don't go to Green Hills. I can only imagine what it must be like to go like, hey, I'm going to go to that conference at that new place that I don't normally go to. So I am really excited. If you don't go to Green Hills, I'm really excited you're here. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, for sure. This conference is something we just hope is really helpful. And something we all inevitably need to pay attention to. And, being healthy in every area of life is super valuable. But in particular, this area, I think we can all agree on that one.
For sure. Kevin talked a little bit about how people tend to neglect their mental health. And that's a shame because, like he said, it's really important. We need to be holistic, physical, mental, spiritual health. For us, mental health has become increasingly important over the years. A lot of different things happened when we were dating or getting married, and then eventually 4 other humans joined our union together, and that caused all kinds of other issues too. They're not adolescents yet, but in a few years we're going to be over in that room for that. But really honestly, mental health is something that we talk about a lot and has become really important to us. We have both benefited greatly from individual therapy as well as marriage therapy. And so we just want to applaud you and encourage you for being here and really just want to continue to normalize this. Something that Kevin said, so this is going to be specifically about regulating anxiety and depression, although it's going to cover, I'm sure, a wide range of issues. Something that Kevin said already triggered my anxiety and depression. He said, men over the age of 40 tend to get more isolated. Do you know what's happening 2 months from tomorrow? I have 2 months left of community before I become isolated. So I'm going to really be regular. Honestly, I can actually remember when I first realized that I struggled with anxiety. I was listening to a podcast and someone was talking about, for me, my anxiety really happens when I start to picture things that haven't happened yet and all these possible scenarios, and it keeps me up at night, and I find that I'm spending more and more time envisioning things that might happen than living in the moment. And I was like, that's what anxiety is? Because for me, it was like this other thing. But then as soon as it was put that way, I was like, I struggle with that all the time. And so for us, just paying attention to our mental health has been really, really important. And so we just want to encourage you that you are in the right place to do that.
Yes, we are excited for this session. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about our speaker. Our speaker is Yesenia Rosas. And she is I had to write it down so I can just tell you all the amazing things about her. She is a licensed marriage and family therapist and an associate professor at Azusa Pacific University. Whoop whoop. Who has experience? I know I'm in the wrong crowd for that one.
You shouldn't have said that.
Who has experience working with depression, anxiety, identity issues, eating disorders, trauma, adjustment to new phases of life, and much more. She is passionate about working with diverse communities and understands that culture and backgrounds shape one's worldview. She also has over a decade of experience serving in ministry and has worked with children and adolescents in various professional roles. So Yesenia will present for about an hour, including some Q&A at the end. So please join us in giving her a really warm welcome.
Turned on the mic, right? The fun part about presenting on regulating anxiety and depression is regulating my own anxiety as I'm talking to you guys, so that'll be really fun. Internally, I'm like, I could play a game with myself of how many times am I drinking my tea to regulate myself or to just coat my throat. So I am not going to tell you guys about myself because they did such a great job, but the information is in your handout. So if you guys didn't get the handout, I did provide electronic copies for the church. So whoever didn't get one or wanted an electronic copy, just know that your guys' church ministry does have one, and I'm sure it'll be posted somewhere for you guys, or you can ask your pastor for the email to get it emailed over to you. So I'm just going to do a quick overview of what I'm going to be talking about today. This fun and fancy word, psychoeducation. It is a tool that we use as therapists all the time in therapy. When I got the topic, specifically the topic name, regulating anxiety and depression, my first question was, how do you do that? Mind you, I'm a licensed therapist who does this all the time. But I was thinking about how do I do it in therapy? And part of that is we educate our clients on what it is that you're telling me. So I think even with what you guys shared in presenting me, having thoughts that are going continuously in your head right before you're going to sleep, thinking about future disasters or taking one small thing about your life and continuously just going worse and worse and worse right before trying to go to bed and not being able to actually do it. And you're just continuously ruminating is the fun word that we use in therapy. That's anxiety. And being able to put words to it and educate a client on that is what's really helpful. So that's what I want to do first before we get into the regulating skills. So anxiety. If you guys flip to the second page, you will see a lot of information that I'm not going to fully cover today. I want to hit general topics. So I always say, this is what I say in class, it's more important what I'm saying than what's on the paper because you guys can take the paper home. The presentation is general, so you don't need to feel like you need to write everything down that's on my slides. This paper you get to take home. There's an electronic copy for you, so this isn't what it's important, it's what I'm saying here. When we're talking about anxiety, we're not just talking about having a thought or two every now and then. When we're talking about diagnosable anxiety, and I like that Kevin made that distinction, it's something that is a little bit more complex. General small glimpses of anxiety in any person is normal. Everybody has a moment in their life where they feel anxious, at least at one point. That does not mean that you have generalized anxiety disorder. It can also be really useful. I remember when I was coming here, I was like, what's a really good example? And the one I can think about is the one that I have all the time. I always light a candle at work. And the way my anxiety will work sometimes is, did I leave that candle on or did I turn it off? Am I about to burn the office down if I leave right now? Then I'm like, let me just go check and open the door again. Okay, I turned it off, great. That is my anxiety being useful for me, right? That is one of those moments where everybody has that. That doesn't mean you have generalized anxiety disorder. Generalized anxiety disorder is a little bit more than that. It's when it's affecting you in your day-to-day life all the time, not just those moments where you forget something and you have a mini panic and you can go check on it. It is when you are having continuous thoughts. I think some of the words I'm going to talk about today are catastrophizing and ruminating. So ruminating is having a thought and continuously thinking about it. So I think I'm going to use the candle one, right? If I was ruminating on that, I wouldn't just leave, check on it, and then it'd be fine. I'd continuously be having this thought of, wait, I know I saw that candle, that it was off, but what if it turned back on when I left? What if somebody came back and they lit it, and because I left the matches there, it's my fault? What if it just magically started melting and now the office is burning? I'm having continuous thoughts. That's ruminating. And if you noticed, when they started to get a little bit worse every time, that's catastrophizing. I feel like it's the simplest version of showing you guys what anxiety can look like. When it's a disorder, when it's a diagnosable thing, is when that's happening all the time for everything. It doesn't have to be one specific thing. It can be multiple things. It's when it is affecting your relationships. It is when it's affecting your mental health on a day-to-day basis. Anxiety is also not a like it's not a thing that it's like, oh, if you have anxiety, then you have panic attacks or you have anxiety attacks, because that's not true either. The one other thing I'm going to do today is teach you guys the difference between an anxiety attack and a panic attack. It's really simple, actually. I feel like the simplest way to talk about it is an anxiety attack you know is coming. It's when you're having thoughts, you're starting to feel a little bit anxious, your heart's starting to palpitate a little bit more, like mine right now, and you're having a hard time breathing. It's when you can almost catch it and be like, what's going on? But then it just keeps going. That's an anxiety attack. A panic attack comes out of nowhere, usually does not need to have a trigger. I think when Kevin said everyone experiences an anxiety attack at one point, I think that's really accurate. Not everybody experiences a panic attack at one point. That is when you have a diagnosable disorder, is when you're having severe panics out of nowhere. What a panic attack looks like is really similar to an anxiety attack, except it has no warning. Out of nowhere, your heart starts to race. Out of nowhere, your thoughts are going crazy. Out of nowhere, you genuinely cannot control your breathing. I think sometimes we have these stigmas of like, oh, then that must mean that there's something wrong with me. What can I do? I think I always hold on to that doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. It just means that you're struggling with something, right? It just means that maybe there's someone you can talk to. Maybe there's someone you can confide in. Maybe learning a couple of skills, as those of you who are in here, can help somebody or yourself when you're going through those moments. I'm going to share a personal story of, clearly I struggle with anxiety, as I've mentioned it like 3 times. But I remember the first time I ever had a panic attack was at a Sam's Club, which is probably not the most convenient place to have a panic attack. This was when I was in grad school, which is a fun one, because this is when my stress is probably at its highest, right? And I remember I looked at my mom, my watch started going crazy. It was like, hey, your heartbeat, out of nowhere. My watch was going crazy. It was like, your heartbeat is at blank. You need to sit down and breathe. Anytime my watch says that, I'm like, shut up. But in this moment, because I'm having a panic attack, there's literally nothing I can do. And I remember just sitting there and going, okay, I'm going to be a little weird right now, but I'm going to lay down on the Sam's Club floor, because if you didn't know, it's concrete and it's freezing cold. And I'm going to breathe until I can calm myself down again. And it worked, gladly. Thank God. It would have been really bad if it kept going. And I think one of the things I'll touch on later when I get into grounding skills is the only reason it worked is because I did things like this. And I learned some of the things that are basic. And it wasn't just because I was in grad school to become a therapist, because trust me, they don't actually teach you how to do this in grad school for therapy. You kind of just learn it as you go and do therapy and do research on your own. But one of the things about grounding and regulating anxiety and depression is that you actually have to practice it. It doesn't just go away. It's not something that you can just learn a grounding skill, use it one time, and then you'll be fine for the rest of your life. You'll never need to practice it. And then when you have that panic attack or that anxiety attack or that thought that's coming or that depressive feeling that's coming on, it's going to help immediately. I'll talk about that a tiny bit more later. But some of the things I wanted to go over. When it comes to anxiety, I want to touch a little bit on adolescent anxiety, especially since that's one of the populations I see the most as a therapist, is around 12 years old to 25 years old is my main population that I work with. There is some differences, and for those who are parents here, I just want to kind of validate your own thoughts that you might be having, and it's adolescents will actually have almost every symptom of anxiety. Almost every symptom. It does not always mean that they have anxiety. Teenagers are going through hormonal changes. Hormonal changes do mimic a lot of anxiety symptoms. So in this sheet, I did put right there, whenever there is something that says common with hormonal changes, I want you guys to note that. It's the ones that aren't common with hormonal changes that are important to look at as a parent. Things such as numbing, stomach nausea, diarrhea or throwing up. In therapy, I like to call it the anxiety poops. It's a real thing. I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding. I remember my first client ever as a therapist was like, I was really nervous and I couldn't stop. I had to use the restroom like 3 times. And I was like, oh, you had anxiety poops. And they're like, there's a name for that? Yeah, that's what I call it. I don't know if it's in the DSM, because it's not, but that's what I call it. It's the ones that are excessive dependence. So in other words, when they are super dependent on either you as a parent or a friend or a stuffed animal or some sort of inanimate object. Various muscle pains and constant tenses, inability to sleep, things like that are not common with hormonal changes. There's more there. Please look at the list. So the ones that say common with hormonal changes, those are regular symptoms of just being a teenager. The ones that don't say that, that's when as a parent you have to start thinking, is this something else? Is this just not stress in school and all of these things? Oftentimes as well, I think when we're thinking spiritually, I don't want to get into a lot of the spiritual stuff. I think Kevin did such a great job at destigmatizing the relationship between our mental health and our relationship with God. I can tell you guys what I see in the room, though. In the room, I think oftentimes clients who are suffering, truly suffering with generalized anxiety, have a hard time spiritually, because the question is always, well, why can't God take this away from me? Am I not Christian enough? Am I not doing enough? And I think when we're talking about, somebody asked a question during Kevin's thing of like, what do you say to that? You truly just sit with it and you're like, you know what? You're not wrong. Like, it sounds like you're doing all of the things. I can't answer why God isn't changing this for you. But sometimes that also means let's use the skills and the things that we have available to us here. And I'm not by any means being like, send them to SIFT, but getting help, whether it's with us or not, is so important when somebody is feeling those thoughts of, am I not Christian enough because this is not going away? I always use the example in therapy of when you have a heart attack, are you going to call an ambulance or are you going to start praying and hope that God makes it go away? The answer is always, I'm going to call the ambulance and then I'll start praying. So then why wouldn't we do the same with our mental health? If you're truly struggling, if you're doing all of the things, why wouldn't you go and reach out to a pastor, reach out to a trusted one within your church, reach out to a friend, and then eventually, if you're doing the things and it's not working, seek professional help. I'm going to go into depression real quick. I am going to note in this worksheet, in the back of the anxiety one, and I'm going to go over this for the grounding stuff, there is a stress versus anxiety. This is something I love to do with clients. When we're having the thoughts like your husband was talking about of thinking about work or thinking about the future, I always like to ask the question, is this stress or is this anxiety? So there's a helpful little worksheet back there for you guys. Now when we're talking about depression, this is a hard one. So I'm going to talk about depression and I'm going to talk about suicide prevention very quickly. It's not going to be as thorough as I would like it to be, but whenever I talk about depression, I always want to include suicide just because it's such a major part. But depression is one of these things where, and I think, again, it's so intimidating going after my boss's boss, Kevin. Depression is genuinely one of those things where you can feel it in someone. It is one of those things where I always think of, I remember in grad school they used the example of Eeyore a lot, of just, if you ever watched Winnie the Pooh, Eeyore, he was like classic, melancholy, consistent depression, and anybody around him would feel just slightly more down when they were with him. That is what it's like to sit with somebody who has depression. It's somebody who is really struggling mentally. It's somebody who is having a hard time and is sad and is teary, and there's not necessarily a reason why they are sad or teary. I think that's the hardest and most frustrating part about struggling with depression, is that there's not an answer a lot of the time. Sometimes there is. Sometimes there's like, there was a lot of death in my family, or I had a lot of trauma, or all of these things. But even with those things, it's like, well, why am I not over it yet? And that's when we like to use the word, well, it sounds like you're struggling with depression. I'm going to read through the worksheet for you guys, but depression looks like being sad and teary, irritable most of the day, nearly every day. It may also feel like you're numb or empty or disconnected, and I think that is one that is so dismissed with clients who struggle with depression. Sometimes depression looks like feeling really sad. Sometimes depression looks like feeling nothing at all. Whenever I have a client who comes in and is like, I just want to work on feeling again, that is my therapist's brain going, okay, so we're struggling with depressive symptoms, because it is so true. A lot of the times, if you're not on a medication that clearly states that it's going to affect your emotions, because some do, the answer is, okay, so we're dealing with depressive symptoms. And I think I want you guys to hold on to that. If you've ever felt numb, if you've ever felt just nothing, that is a sign of depression. It honestly, the way I've seen it is usually in my older adults, so usually anybody over 40 are the ones who are commonly feeling, and I'm sorry that the number's 40, guys. I'm the second one to say it, but it's usually I think that symptom is most common in people over the age of 40, and I think part of it is because you guys are busy, you have a life, you're doing so many things, and then suddenly you're not that busy anymore. And maybe it does coincide with the lack of social and being a little bit more isolated, which definitely goes into anxiety and depression. But yeah, sudden loss of interest in most activities, changes in weight and appetite, which is such a big one that people do not realize can also be depression. It doesn't need to be an eating disorder, because depression does come with a lack of either wanting to eat or wanting to overeat just to find some dopamine, meaning some excitement. There's restlessness, constantly irritated, loss of energy, feeling worthless or hopelessness. Those are the big words that whenever you guys are dealing with people, whether it's your friends, your community, your kids, if you're hearing, I'm feeling hopeless, I'm feeling really restless, I'm not sleeping as much, those are always really clear signs of like, okay, what's going on? Right? Even in therapy, I throughout my being pre-licensed and becoming licensed, I worked at a mental hospital for a little bit under 2 years, and we used to have this thing called ADLs, acts of daily living, and I would consistently ask everybody, like, did you do your acts of daily living? Did you brush your hair, wash your teeth, change your underwear, change your socks, take a shower? Simple things, right? You might be like, okay, Yesenia, why? Because someone who's struggling with depression genuinely, especially if it's severe depression, cannot do those things. It is a chore to take a shower. Sometimes it's even things like, okay, if you can't take a shower, can we buy wipies and just wipe your arms and your armpits and those areas that are probably a little bit more sweaty? And I know that sounds crazy of like, what? Yeah, because depression will affect you in that way. There's a visual in a show, it's really inappropriate, but there's a visual in a show that I saw once and it was actually in grad school that I saw it, that I think showed such an accurate depiction of being depressed. And it was this actor named Zendaya, and she was laying in bed, super depressed. She was watching like Love Island for like a whole weekend, and she was feeling so low that she genuinely couldn't even get up to go pee, to the point of giving herself an infection. That is a really good visual of severe depression. Now, that's not what it always looks like, though. I think looking at the signs and knowing what they look like, which is why it's all written here, is so helpful. But with depression and spirituality, I think sometimes the ones that are most important are the lack of meaning and purpose, the insecurity and self-doubt, guilt and shame. Guilt and shame are such a big one when it comes to that spiritual factor with almost any mental health thing. And I think part of that is the destigmatizing mental health in the church. So what you guys are doing today is a step towards breaking down that guilt and shame of not just being able to talk about it, but also being able to say, hey, this is okay, right? Like, it's not your choice. Nobody's choosing to have generalized anxiety or choosing to be depressed. Because I can guarantee you guys, as somebody who sees it all the time, if they could change it, they would. And I think that's one to take. I'm not doing the parent seminar, but those of you who are parents and you are struggling with your teenagers who are having these symptoms, that is one that I want you guys all to hear and hold. If you guys are seeing these signs in your adolescence, if they could change it, they probably would. Nobody wants to have continuous thoughts of hopelessness, restlessness, continuous worry every single day, all the time. Nobody wants to struggle with that. I'm going to go into suicide prevention real quick. When we're talking about depression, oftentimes what happens is that we also have suicidal thoughts. I want to make sure that everybody leaves with one thing, and it's don't be scared of saying the word suicide. It is not a scary thing to say. Oftentimes, I think we're scared that if we use the word suicide, that we're just going to make somebody more suicidal. That is a myth. It is not true. Using the word and even just asking the question, hey, I'm hearing that you're feeling really sad and hopeless. I'm seeing that you're withdrawing from youth group or not coming to church as much. Have you been having suicidal thoughts? It helps destigmatize not only the thoughts, but it almost makes the person feel welcome to talk about it with you or with a pastor or with someone else. I'm going to use a personal example again of even just my own work. I remember being a Sunday school teacher and having a little 10-year-old boy come up to me and tell me, like, I'm having thoughts of wanting to kill myself, just like that. And I, at the time, had no idea what to do with it. I was not in grad school yet. I was maybe like barely 19, and I was scared. I was terrified. I was like, what does this mean? Why is this 10-year-old boy coming, one, trusting me, and two, telling me this really scary thing? I then learned that it was because I was the only person in his life who actually cared to ask him, hey, how are you doing? Something as simple as like, hey, did you get a snack? Do you want to take a snack home? I saw him once a week for Sunday school for maybe an hour. And that was impactful enough for him to come and trust me and say, hey, I'm having these thoughts. What I did, because I'm 19 at this point and know nothing, was give it to the Sunday school director. And I was like, hey, I don't know what to do with this. Luckily, she was a therapist and she knew exactly what to do. Now I know what to do. One of the first things that we want to do when we're talking about, or somebody is talking to us about being suicidal, is just validate their feelings. Validate that the experience that they are going through is normal. Validate that the thoughts that they are having must be for a reason, even if we can't understand it. Even if for us, we immediately want to go into, let me pray for you, let me help you, how can I be there for you? That is not what you want to do. What you want to do is just validate, hey, I'm hearing what you're telling me. I just want to tell you that I'm right here with you. The next thing we want to do is empathize. So I think one of the best things we can do when we empathize is showing that you genuinely care by listening. And I am so shocked every time when I learn that people don't genuinely know how to listen. Oftentimes, the skill in therapy that I have to teach is teach, especially couples, how to listen to one another. And I do this fun little exercise where I have one person say something, and then I have the next person repeat exactly what that person said to them. Almost 80% of the time, it's not what that person said. And we have to go back and say, okay, so that's not what she said. I'm going to have her say it again, and then I want you to repeat word by word what she says. Okay? This is an example. Then they do that, and then it's, okay, now I want you to tell me your interpretation of what she said. And then this person will go and say, like, well, I heard that she said blah, blah, blah. Is that accurate? Then the spouse will go, yeah, that's accurate. That's listening. It's being able to show that you're listening. So when you're talking to someone about suicide, if they're telling you, hey, I'm feeling really hopeless and really restless, and I don't want to be here anymore. Showing them that you're listening looks like, hey, I'm hearing that you're telling me that you're struggling and you're having a hard time and that you do not want to be here anymore. Do you think that maybe you could be suicidal? The last thing would be don't keep it a secret. I use this one at schools, this specific slide at schools a lot. And I think for those of you who are adults, if you do not know what to do when someone is telling you that they are suicidal, don't keep it a secret. Tell somebody who does. My favorite resource to give, and I have all of the resources at the back of this handout, but it's calling 988. It's the National Suicide Hotline. It's not just helpful for those who are struggling with depression and suicidal thoughts, but it's also helpful as a resource for those of us who are struggling with somebody in our lives who are suicidal. And I'm going to tell you guys why. If you have somebody who's telling you these thoughts and you don't know how to respond, you can call 988 and tell them, hey, this is what's going on. I have this person here with me, and they will help you assess what you need to do next. Sometimes it's, no, they're safe, they're fine. Let's just get them connected to their parents or to their pastors or whoever it is. Sometimes it's, okay, no, we need to take them to the hospital or call the ambulance or call a CAT team, which is a team that is made to assess these specific situations. But that is the one resource, if you guys take something with you, is if you have someone who's struggling with suicide, call 988, and they can always help you with what to do next. And if you don't know what to do next and you don't want to take that responsibility, I always say hand it off to your pastors, hand it off to your youth pastors, hand it off to someone who does know how to do it. And if anything, you can validate and empathize. Now I'm going to go into grounding, and I'm going to go back and touch on anxiety and depression through this. This is what I want to spend most of my time doing because it's called regulating anxiety and depression. So let's talk about it. Like I said earlier, even with the name of this, regulating anxiety and depression, there's not necessarily one thing that I can teach you guys today and say, if you do this, you're 1,000% going to regulate your anxiety and you're not going to struggle anymore, because there's not an equation for that. Otherwise, we wouldn't have a job. And honestly, that would be a great thing if there was an equation for it, because I wouldn't mind not having a job if it meant people aren't struggling anymore. Grounding is a technique that you guys can do, and you probably already do naturally, to help regulate your nervous system, to help calm down the thoughts that are in your head, to help calm down whatever feelings you're having. Grounding is a learned skill, but it is also, again, like I said, something you do naturally. Somebody yawned right now. That is a natural grounding skill. What I'm going to have everybody do, and this is where we're going to get to the practical side, I'm going to have everyone take a deep breath, but I'm going to lead you guys through it, okay? Whenever anyone tells you to do a breathing exercise, you breathe through your nose and out through your mouth always, okay? So you guys are going to take a deep breath in through your nose, and you're going to keep breathing until you cannot breathe anymore. And then you're going to sigh as loud as you can. There we go. Now you guys can totally do better than that. You're going to take a deep breath in through your nose. And okay, we're going to do that 2 more times together. Deep breath in through your nose until you cannot breathe anymore. And sigh. 1 more time in through your nose. And sigh. Now this is what we call a therapeutic sigh. It is my favorite one to do. And I'm going to tell you guys why. Not only does it help regulate your nervous system, which will help calm you down, but it also helps you guys because it's something you do naturally all the time. How many times have you been at work stressed and you just go, how many times have you heard your teenage son or daughter come in the room and just be like, leave their backpack and walk to the room and close the door? It is something we already do naturally, so it's an easy one, and it doesn't make you look weird if you're in public just going, and you're naturally regulating your nervous system. Now, I do always recommend do it at least 3 times to actually help, but even just doing it once, if you guys take a minute to notice, your shoulders will automatically drop. I didn't even tell you guys to do it, and you all did it. You will automatically be like, you're also just naturally like loosening the tension in your muscles. You're naturally letting go of that stress that's in your body. The fun thing about dealing with stress, anxiety, and depression is that the symptoms do also come physically. Just like I talked about with the stuff of like having diarrhea or throwing up or feeling numb or having stomach aches. Anxiety and depression do have physical symptoms that are all over your body, so why not help regulate them with physical things? Grounding is techniques that help control these symptoms by turning attention away from those thoughts and memories or worries and refocusing them on the present moment. One of my favorite things when it comes to grounding is we also do it in church. When we're singing worship songs to God, when we're praying and probably and hopefully telling God every single thing that you've been thinking or doing or wanting to talk to somebody about that you haven't talked to about, but you're giving it to Him, that is a form of a grounding exercise, and you're doing it and you don't even realize it. Instead of journaling, you're praying. Instead of maybe going to somebody and talking to someone, you're singing a worship song that really resonates with you in that moment. That is a grounding skill. That is a mindfulness skill. That is going and using the resources that you have. If you saw me outside before this, there was some songs that were playing that I was humming along to. That was me just naturally going like, you know what, God, I'm just going to let you take over my anxiety right now, and I'm just going to sing this little worship song, and it's going to bring me some sort of peace. Even if I was doing it to worship God, actually, or to just regulate my anxiety, it's still doing the same thing. I want to go over practical tips, so that's what we're going to do. So very quickly, we're going to do a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So with the person that's sitting next to you, if you have someone next to you, if you don't, I would advise you to sit next to somebody right now. You're going to go through the list. It's on the 4th page, I believe. It's on this page, the first one that says grounding skills. And we're going to go through them, and I'm going to tell you guys how to go through them. So what I want you to do first is to the person sitting next to you, you're going to tell them 5 things that you can see right now, and you're going to name them. So for example, I can see my Awala cup, I can see this iPad, I can see my worksheets, I can see this cup, and I can see the TV right there. So I want you guys to do that to your partner. Go ahead. Deeper. So the next one, you guys can keep going. The next one is 4 things that you can feel. So when we do the 4 things you can feel, for those of you who are listening, you actually feel them. So I want you to say, I can feel this paper. I can feel this cup. I can feel that chair. So go ahead and do the next one. Huh? Oh. The third one is 3 things that you can hear. So this is fun with everybody in the room talking. If you know people's names around you, you can say them. But tell your partner 3 things you can hear. The second one is 2 things that you can smell. Now, this one is a fun one in a room like this. In therapy, one thing that I will usually say is smell your clothes and your hair. Those are the easiest things accessible to you. If you can't do that, you can smell your skin. You can smell something that you have on you. If you have something, for example, I always keep perfume in my purse, I'll probably smell that. So go ahead and do that. And now, as you guys are done smelling things, we're gonna come back over here to me. The last one is one thing that you can taste. Now, if you have a mint or sour candy or something, feel free to pop it in your mouth. If you don't, I always recommend, especially if you're struggling with anxiety, if you do not have times to do 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 technique, you can always just do the one, and it's pop a sour candy or a really strong mint in your mouth, or take a sip of something warm or something really cold. That is just gonna naturally help regulate you. So if you have that available to you, I'm glad. And if you don't, then that's okay, and now you know. But you guys just did a grounding technique. Now I'm gonna explain what it is so that it makes it a little bit easier to remember. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 technique is using your 5 senses. It does not matter what order you do it in. You don't need to do 5 things you can see or 4 things that you can touch. I do it in that order just because if you notice, you probably won't have 5 things you can taste, right? All the time available to you. So it's using your senses. So when you're thinking grounding, what is a skill I can do? It's I can use my senses. I can hear, I can touch, I can taste, I can smell, I can feel. Okay? Now, we're gonna do one of my favorite techniques. And when I say favorite, I mean this is one that I did while I was sitting back there. This is one that I do when I'm driving. This is one that I actively do as I'm being a therapist, honestly. It's called bots breathing. This is one that you only do one time. You never repeat it more than once because it can make you feel lightheaded, but it's so helpful. If you have asthma, do not recommend that you participate in this one, okay? So we're gonna breathe in through our nose for 4 seconds. Hold on. And then we're gonna hold it for 4 seconds. And then we're gonna exhale for 4 seconds. And then we're gonna hold it for 4 seconds, okay? So I'm gonna walk you guys through it the way I do in therapy. Everybody close your eyes if you feel comfortable and safe enough around the person you're sitting around. And you're just gonna take a slow, deep breath in through your nose. 1, 2, 3, 4. You're gonna hold your breath. 1, 2, 3, 4. And breathe out. 2, 3, 4. Hold your breath. 2, 3, 4. Breathe in. Hold your breath. Exhale. Hold your breath. Breathe in. Hold your breath. Exhale. Hold your breath. Last one, breathe in. Hold your breath. Exhale. Hold your breath. And now just take a really deep breath in and let it out slowly. I want you guys to take a moment. How does your body feel? How does your neck feel? How do your shoulders feel? Can you feel your knees in this moment? Can you feel your thighs touching the chair? Do you feel more relaxed? Are you maybe a little bit less anxious? That is one of my favorite things to not only teach clients, but actively do all the time. This is one of those exercises that, as fun as it is research-backed. It helps calm down the vagus nerve, which then calms down your nervous system. It is one of those exercises that is super helpful to use in everyday life. I even have a little ring. It's in a square shape and it just says breathe. And when I get really anxious, I'll just go through the corners of it and do it myself. Now I'm gonna go to resources real quick, just because I want you guys to have questions and time, but how to seek therapy. So there's a fun QR code if you want to do the QR code. There's the table that has the cards with the QR code. If you want to do it with SIFT, that's how you would do it. The way that we work in general is that we have a wonderful and beautiful admin team who is so good at taking in your guys' request, what you're seeking, and they will match you with the right therapist that's not only within your budget, but also what you need. So for example, I see a lot of teens who are suicidal, depressed, anxious, or questioning identity or sexuality. So they'll probably match you with me. Or if you're a couple who is struggling and you live in the area, they'll probably send you to Mike. He's back there. There's also Zach, who's great. But that's what it works. That's how it works at SIFT. And I put so many resources for you guys in the back of the sheet. I'm gonna go over some of them. What I want you guys to take, even when we're talking about regulating anxiety and depression, is that there's not a cure, there's not an answer, and I know that that's not very hopeful, but just learning about it, being able to talk about it, and being able to guide people towards resources is what is really helpful. I always recommend, if you are struggling with anxiety or depression, or if your teen is struggling with anxiety or depression, or your kid is struggling with anxiety or depression, use social media for the better. I would say follow Headspace. They post things like what I just guided you guys towards all the time. Even with me, I am chronically online. When I scroll and Headspace pops up, I will stop and do the breathing exercise, even if I don't need to, just because the animation is cute, it looks really fun, and why not? And it guides you through it, so it's super easy. So I always say, if you're a parent or if you're a teenager or you have access to social media in some way, follow Headspace. They also have a YouTube. If you do not have social media, the one thing I do convince parents a lot of the times to let their kids download on their phone is either the How I Feel app or I Feel app. I should probably grab my phone and check the actual name, which will help not only have people who are trained in this, who they have videos up of walking you through practical coping skills, but it also helps check in with how you're feeling on a daily basis. It'll send you a little notification and it'll say, hey, how are you feeling? And it sends a chart so you don't even need to think about it and you can just scroll through it. It's a fun little interactive tool and it makes it so easy to just even know if you're struggling or not, if you had a good day or not. And it records it for you, so when you've had a week, it'll be like, hey, who are you reaching out to? Because this whole week you've been super stressed, or this whole week you've been really low. So I always recommend that one. Some other stuff that I will go through here is the 988 number, the suicide prevention hotline. They also have the 988 website, which has so many resources for parents, for churches, for leaders, for teachers even. They have whole lesson plans on that website, the national hotline website. There's NAMI, which is the National Alliance of Mental Illness, which is not my favorite name, but they are local to Orange County, and they have this wonderful thing called the Warm Line. The Warm Line is a 24/7 call number. You don't need to be suicidal. You don't even need to be depressed. Honestly, you can even just be struggling for the day and you just need to rant to somebody. They are there for that exact thing. They are not therapists. They're just trained professionals who are there to listen. And if they need to guide you toward a resource, they will. I love giving this one to kids and teens if parents are okay with it, because it's really helpful, especially when they're like, hey, I'm freaking out because I got a really bad test grade and I'm scared to tell my mom. Or, hey, my mom just fought with me and I need to talk to somebody about it and I don't want to tell my friends because I'm scared. It's a really good resource, especially for kids, but it's also a good resource for adults because sometimes we need to rant to somebody and we can't rant to our peers or our coworkers, or maybe we shouldn't. I don't know if it's the years of ministry work, but I always go, if you're ever gonna rant about your problems, it should always be to somebody above you. Just because you never want problems going down. But I always try to rant to somebody who knows more than me or who can handle something. And that warm line is there for people who need someone to handle it for them and just listen to them. Other than that, I want to give you guys time for questions. So I think he will be walking around with a mic. And I will try to answer them to the best of my ability. And if not, then I will point at Mike and Zach to answer them for me. Those are fellow therapists from SIF, by the way. So any questions? Everyone's good?
Were you raising your hand?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you often work with physicians?
Can you repeat that?
Do you often work with physicians whose patients are having depression and anxiety, and it's related to medication, but the medication is really necessary for their condition?
So that's a hard question to answer. So yes and no. It would depend on the person itself, and it would depend on what is going on. So when it comes to medication side effects, yes, it's something that therapy could be useful, even just to process the fact that you have to be on this medication for your health. And sometimes even providing regulating skills, talking about it with someone and being able to process it with somebody is really helpful. And then, yes, the answer would be if you're in therapy for that reason and you have a doctor managing all of that for you, personally speaking, as the therapist, I would want to have a release of information to be able to talk to your doctor. So not only I can get educated on what's going on, but then your doctor can also be in the loop of what we're doing in therapy. Because then sometimes that's helpful for them to even just to know where you are at, especially if the medication is required for your health. Yeah, so yes and no. Anybody else?
For anxiety, one time somebody recommended to intake magnesium glycinate. Is that something that helps you with anxiety, or?
So I'm not a psychiatrist, but not magnesium glycinate. It's not citrate. That's the one that makes you poop. It's magnesium. Oh goodness, hold on. I even take some. Actually, hold on. I might have it in my purse too. I use this thing called Prim. It's a little anxiety thing, and it has magnesium in it. I will look it up for you because it has the right magnesium in it. But yes, so I'm not going to say I recommend it or it works because I'm not a psychiatrist. However, I have had client psychiatrists recommend that they take a magnesium supplement. Usually on its own, though, it is not enough to help manage anxiety. It does have to be coincide with something. So even when a psychiatrist is giving you anxiety medication or depression medication, they would still recommend you see a therapist because the medication is just going to help the symptoms, where a therapist will actually help with the actual problem. But let me get you the name. I always forget which one it is. It is the magnesium that is called, give me 1 second. You know what? I will have to look it up after and give you the answer, but I can tell you that the other one that they usually, and actually most of the time when you find them, they'll be together. It's that specific type of magnesium and L-theanine as well. And those are usually the ones that I have psychiatrists recommend to clients, but it's also usually because they're already in therapy and they're already taking anxiety meds. So I can confidently say that taking a supplement on its own is not going to help. But the reason why technically this type of magnesium and L-theanine help calm down is because they help with muscle tension. So it helps release it, and then it also helps you calm because it helps you sleep. So when you can sleep and when your muscles don't feel as tense, you don't feel your anxiety as much because anxiety does cause you to be tense all the time. Yeah.
Would you recommend getting clinically diagnosed?
That is such a hard question to answer. I think it depends on for what. If we're talking anxiety and depression, your general medical provider can help you help diagnose that for you, or just seeing a therapist can help diagnose that for you. But if we're talking more severe, so like mental health that is education-wise, so ADHD, autism, anything like that, not only would I recommend it, but I would recommend it you do it properly with a proper assessment through a psychologist or a psychiatrist. But yes, it is helpful to have a diagnosis just because it makes you feel like you're not crazy and there's a name for what's going on, but it's not necessarily necessary unless it's something that's severely impacting your everyday life and you need an answer.
I have 2 questions.
Yeah.
On the resources, what is the New Hope 24 hotline?
Let me pull it up. I cannot tell you from the top of my head. Oh, it's a counseling crisis. So it's like the warm line. It is just another phone number that you can call 24/7. Only I believe that they do have actual counselors on the other side of it instead of just trained professionals.
And my other question is, besides SIFT, is there any area for like grief groups or anxiety groups that you know of, or any resources on here that?
I do, but I would need to give you the resources on the side because I don't know them from the top of my head. But there is a actually in the area, there is a counseling group that's called Renovari, Renoveri, I think, counseling, and they are in Fullerton, and they have a therapist called, oh goodness, Katie. She just got married, so I do not remember her last name, but she specifically has groups for grief and for usually younger adults struggling with grief as well. Yeah, but they do a lot of group counseling. But I can also send you a resource for them because I do have a couple of therapists that do them. Like I know a therapy site called Salt Therapy Group in Newport are currently doing grief groups as well. Yeah, and so does Forbes Therapy also in Newport with Kevin Cram. Yeah. Anybody else? Any more questions? Yeah.
A lot of us older women, especially, are dealing with older parents and things in ourself going towards that older age. And realizing the dependency that they need as they're getting into their end years. And for me, my relatives are far away, so it's not like I can just walk next door or drive over. Is there some way of coping with that anxiety of just being able to be ready for those steps, this one step to the next step?
Yeah, there is. So first, the biggest resource I can give you is Medi-Cal and Medicare provide group counseling for that specific thing, and so does Orange County has a lot of local older adult groups that are specific to that, and it's usually a social worker who's handling them, and it really is just, think of it as like an AA group, but filled with people similar in age who are going through the same struggles, who are genuinely just talking about the life transition. The second thing I would say is that is actually what older adult phase of life looks like in therapy, and it's processing the anxiety of either becoming the dependent child whose parents are now having to be dependent on you, or becoming the parent who is now needing to be dependent on their child. It is not a thing that is talked about enough, but not only does it cause anxiety, but it could even cause severe depression just because it's such a big change of life that nobody really talks about how big of a change it is, which is why I feel like the group counseling groups are really helpful for things like that, but even individual therapy. I don't do this kind of therapy just because I don't see older adults. I did when I was pre-licensed, because licensed person I don't, but there's so many people at SIFT who do, and what that looks like is even just sitting down with somebody and processing your life story, and then processing the anxiety and depressive symptoms that come with needing to be dependent and needing help, because it's really hard. And then the other part, which I have done and I do, is being the adult that needs to be the stable person in their family to help their mom and dad, which is not easy at all. Yeah.
We can do maybe one more question, if that's okay with you, Yesenia. We can do maybe one more.
No.
Yeah. I'm coming over.
Hi.
Hi.
My question, might be kind of different, but you were at the beginning of your, I think it's called an epilogue, or you're giving us your credentials. You said about panic attacks and anxiety attacks. That's when your heart is racing, your muscles are constricted and they're tight.
Yeah.
I have bipolar schizophrenia, and I'm treated for that, and thank you, Jesus, for me being on the right medication for the last 12, 13 years.
Yeah.
Why do I feel when I exercise I'm getting panic attacks, like I'm crawling out of my skin?
Yeah.
Exercise is supposed to be healthy. Is it releasing stuff in my brain that am I changing the chemistry of those medications I'm taking when I'm exercising? Because I find myself irritable, restless, and discontented when I'm exercising.
Yeah.
And that's not what I want to be. I'm exercising to stay healthy and to exhaust that energy so I can have a good rest, peaceful sleep at night.
Yeah. First, let me thank you for your vulnerability and even asking that question. That was a lot of information, and that was really brave of you. I think second, I'm not an expert and I'm not like your doctor, but I would say consult with your psychiatrist first and your medical provider, because it's very well that it could be just a symptom of the medication. So something we already know about medication that is to treat, or that I know that is to treat schizophrenia, is that it, one, does actually cause different muscle reactions. You can even get tics and things like that. That is part of the medication because it is so strong. And two, you are on the right track of, yes, so one of the reasons why exercise is such a helpful thing when you are struggling with anxiety and depression is because it releases dopamine into your brain. So dopamine is a happy chemical, but it's also one of those chemicals that it's, when you drink coffee, it's the same thing, and it makes your heart palpitate and all of those things. So maybe even doing lower impact exercises might be even more helpful to have a slow, steady stream of dopamine rather than going for a run, or I saw you were wearing a Harley Davidson shirt, going and riding your motorcycle, like things like that might not help so much with the palpitation of things, and doing more lower impact, like walking in a pool or just going for a walk, a slow walk around your neighborhood. However, again, consult with your doctor, because it's very likely that what you're experiencing is more a combination of the exercise and the medication and just a side effect, which sometimes can just mean they can either add something to it to help that not happen, which is often what they do, like when you're having the muscle tension tics, or they can just help, even just validate that, oh yeah, that's a side effect of your medication. And then that kind of helps you be like, okay, then what kind of exercise can I do? And oftentimes they can even refer you to a physical therapist who can give you exercises that are appropriate on your medication with your condition. I hope that helps. Yeah.
Can we thank Yesenia for her time and her expertise? And you may have already, but don't forget